Stephen, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Frank, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's
great to be here.
Oh, it's always great to have you on. I forget when it was. It was probably back in spring or something like that. But man, we always have very prescient conversations, don't we?
Yes.
Yes. I think the last time we were on, you and I think we did the 7 tenets of the Satanic Church, and then not to get too much into this, but you probably have seen Cosmopolitan magazine.
No, I haven't seen it.
About 3 weeks ago or something like that, they put out a article about abortion and the right, the pretty much the sacrificial right of abortion, as the Satanic Church pretty much says it is. Now, instead of Cosmopolitan doing a dig into what this claim is, they actually gave a how-to. How for a woman to prepare themselves, pretty much passing along the ritual that is prescribed by the church itself. It's like, if we talk once every 6 months, 6 months later, it's like they took 5 steps forward.
That's right. That's unbelievable. I mean, if you just break it down to the most basic thing in the world, you're saying a woman has a right to terminate the life of her own child. Why? How does that not sound insane to everybody? I don't get that.
Well, it's more so in what they put out as the several steps of the ritual, and it's all about preparing oneself and throughout the whole thing reaffirming your power, your individual power. When in actuality, you're severing the one thing that makes you so powerful in expressing that humanity that we're born with. It's all an inversion, as we concluded the last time that we were on, but. Still, I know, but that's education, and that really,
it sure is. Yeah.
That's it, But before we get into the Christmassy theme stuff, I wanted to talk to you about these articles that have been popping up a lot lately. Every day, different authors from different public figures. I just mentioned Al Gore, expressed in a variety of ways the assertion that alternative media, news, uninhibited comedy, and of course, which is seldom mentioned, but we know that they are very scared about it, independent homeschooling for educating America's future. They say that this threatens democracy itself. Go ahead and give me some thoughts on that.
I wish I had about 10 hours, Frank. It's just so absurd. The guy like Al Gore, all these guys want the same thing. And it began with public education and the war on the family. They must destroy the family and usurp the authority of parents to get it into the hands of the state so that they can be in charge of everything. They want to micromanage every little thing. And the word democracy is not democracy at all. They mean fascist, totalitarian dictatorship that destroys the family and makes everybody a ward of the state. It should be obvious by now, but it's not. I remember about 10 years ago when I really went public with the fact that the public schools are destroying not just your family, but any possibility for you to authentically be educated. And at the time, it seemed crazy. But now it's pretty obvious. And thank goodness parents are pulling their kids out of the public schools because it's a nightmare. But it's one lie after another. I'm trying to think of something you just conveyed that was true that those guys said. There's not even half truths in it.
I know. And what you said there too, it's happening faster and faster with parents, not only new parents who are committed from the get-go that my child is never going to be in a school, public or private, and I'm going to do this the old-fashioned way. But there's also a lot of children who are being taken out in 3rd, 4th grade and being brought back home. I love how that's happening a lot too. And we're talking about a shift in millions over the last couple of years. And of course, the lockdowns really accelerated it. So you can see how as they really go forward, they lurch forward with this full court press of really trying to go for the end game and capturing the last of society and bending the world to their will. As they really lurch forward in that last spring attack, they lose so much more control than they ever thought, because it's just we're too wily at times there, Stephen.
Thank goodness, right? Thank goodness for that American spirit. But hopefully more and more people pull their kids out of the schools. I think they just don't realize how bad it is. And can I issue a challenge to your audience?
Please.
You have a really great audience.
Please, go ahead.
In good faith, we have to be on. We're kind of constrained by truth and charity, where the state's not constrained by anything. The things they put out are so dishonest and such lies. I've been asking people for a while now and challenging them to say, can anyone tell me one theoretical truth taught in the public schools? That doesn't mean the same as, are there any practically good things going on? Because there are. But my point is this, it is theoretical underpinnings. Is there a single true principle? Is there a single true definition? And is there a single true good and noble intention in the roots, the theoretical roots of the public school? My answer is no. I'd be super grateful if somebody proved me wrong. That'd be great.
What would be an example of a theoretical truth that you would that you would like to see somebody mention or attempt to argue for?
If somebody were to say, when it comes to human learning, we identify and acknowledge the intellect. That's just true about authentic education. In the modern school, they reduce intellect to the brain, and they reduce the immateriality of intellection to the materiality of perception and material regurgitation. It's literally that limited. There is no concept for the 3 acts of the mind and intellect. That might have been a little heady of an example, but how about just the definition of the human person? How about saying, what is a human person? And they say this, it's a trousered ape who's evolved from an animal and is not different in kind, but different by degree. That's a lie. We are different in kind because of our free will and because of our intellect and the spirited nature of our souls. So that's an example.
Could you go a little bit more into that 3 layers? What would you just say there about the intellect?
Yeah, the intellect. For example, in the modern school, they've taken the word intellect and they've treated it like they just treated the word woman. They have no idea what it means. There's a theory called multiple intelligences, and it's a total fraud and a total farce, and everybody loves it. You know, the modern school talks about emotional EQ. Guess what? That's an oxymoron unless you abuse the word intellect. So the reality is that in the intellect, there are 3 things the intellect does. First, it apprehends what is. Second, it makes judgments about what is. And third, it takes those judgments and reasons to new knowledge. It's a phenomenal thing, and it's absent in the modern school. The modern school takes intellect and says, you have kinesthetic intellect. False, but that's what they say. You have interpersonal intellect. False, but that's what they say. You have emotional. It's just ridiculous. It's almost embarrassing if everybody didn't take it seriously.
Well, there's something in there too that they that I always get the inference, or at least they're always insinuating that there is really only material value to anything, and there's never any real value placed or any contemplation on the soul or the supernatural, especially. Which is why it's almost impossible to talk theology and religion, because it's off the bat there is no room for something that is without scientific explanation that could really contribute to any kind of human experience here on Earth. And I guess when it comes, I saw you wrote something before that you said that there's 7 words. Yes. 7 words where, if properly understood, there's nothing more needed to truly educate a soul. And I would, that really, since we're talking about the physical, the non-physical, the soul, I would love to know exactly what those 7 words are.
I would love to show them to you. Can I back up just a moment and offer some good news to homeschooling families?
Yes.
I meant to say this earlier, so I got really excited about what you're talking about, because talking about Al Gore saying what he says is crazy. But parents don't realize this, but first of all, you should pull your kids out of school. And most parents are really nervous because they realize they cannot do at home what the public school does. And that's true, but that's a good thing. So a litmus test for what you should do at home, if you pull your kids out of school and do nothing, that's great. But your litmus test is you should do nothing that was done to you and nothing that your kids are going through. And that frees you up to cultivate the right kind of relationship with your children, to give them an authentic education, which is so simple and so plain compared to the complexity and the jargon and the silliness and the lies that the modern public school gives us. I just want to offer that good news.
Well, I'm glad you did, because I was going to ask you to give people a little bit more encouragement who are determined to homeschool, but are just really terrified of screwing something up. Because all of a sudden you're like, hey, okay, this is a responsibility I'm taking into my own hands, and this is something that we delegated for generations now. How am I at all qualified? And that's what the media wants people to feel, like you're not qualified for this. I am a, your third grade teacher is specially trained in, they've been through all the DEI courses and stuff like that. But, Stephen, I saw this tweet from a buddy of mine, Wyatt, yesterday, and he said this, and I had to keep it for tonight. He said, 1995, it was, don't homeschool your kids, they'll be weird. In 2023, it's kids in public schools identifying as barn animals. You think about that, it's such a simple meme, really, in itself, where, in 95, when you heard about somebody who was homeschooled, that was very odd. And now, I'm just like, I really want to do everything in my power so that my daughter does not end up like everybody else. Yeah, I really do.
That's right. Yeah, Al Gore called me right before the show and said, tell them not to pull their kids out of the schools because then they'll destroy democracy, which is another untruth. So pull your kids out of school today and you will do them an exponentially valuable favor, even if you're terrible at homeschooling, which you're not, because you get graces in the natural family to be your kids' first teachers. It's your job and it's beautiful. Yeah, that's really important.
No, it is. It is. So these 7 words, I want to know about them.
Yeah, I sent you a picture of them. I hope you got it. Did you get a picture?
Actually, let me go back to the email. Hold on a second.
Yeah, I have a picture. You can put it up there and people can take a screenshot and you'll be shocked. If you learned deeply what these 7 words mean, it's the totality of an authentic liberal arts and science education.
Okay.
It's the gold standard.
Okay, I see it here. Hold on a second. Wait, this is... Oh, okay, we got it. Here it is. All right, awesome. So what do you want me to start with, the top or the bottom?
Well, if you start at the bottom, it's the easiest, because what I did there is I made this chart that starts small and ascends and grows as it builds on every single subject before. And they're not subjects, really. They're arts and sciences.
I just put it on the screen on top of you right now. So there you go. Go ahead.
So at the very bottom, you have gymnastics. Gymnastics is just the idea of bodily and kinesthetic awareness of the world around you. That means get your kids active, go camping, go hiking, do sports, not organized soccer or anything like that, but do sports, do activities, get physical. And it's great for parents to be physical with their kids. Basketball, football, baseball, all those things are fantastic. So gymnastics is vital to get started. That second thing there, poetry, is deeply misunderstood too. And in a minute, Frank, I'll tell you why these things are so hard to understand. But gymnastics and poetry just means be active and be a great storyteller. Bring your children the greatest stories ever told. Don't bring your children garbage. Don't bring them poorly written things. I mean, Dr. Seuss is outside of the line of what's appropriate for a young soul. And I know everybody loves Dr. Seuss, but he's below the low bar. So bring your children wonderful stories. Right above that is where things get serious intellectual, and you start with what's called the trivium, and that is the 3 liberal arts, which is really one art, one massive art about how we deal with language. Grammar, logic, and rhetoric are how we understand the categories of the world, how to construct thoughts and sentences, how to think clearly, and then how to articulate clearly. That trivium is the gold standard as a liberating art. Now, if you've heard those words, they've taken the trivium and they've made it servile. They've ruined it. If you imitate the public schools, you will ruin it too. So know that it's the most valuable starting liberal arts on the planet, the trivium. Right about the trivium is quadrivium, which are...
Hold on one second, Steve. On the trivium, do you have... I know that we talked about this before, and we kind of glazed over it, though we did trivium and quadrivium in one prior conversation. But if there was a... What do you think is the easiest, most comprehensive source on how to bring the trivium alive at home. Do you have a recommendation? Is this something that you take care of? I want you to talk a little bit about City of Truth later on, but for anybody hearing it for the first time and they're thinking, how the hell do I teach rhetoric at home? Where can we find a crash course in this?
Unfortunately, there's really no gold standard today because we're so far into materialism that they've taken these wonderful arts and they've made them servile by subordinating them to worksheets and tests and all these other terrible things. So unfortunately, we're going to have to go back into the tradition. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but if you got your hands on St. Augustine's book called De Magistro, that means On the Teacher, that would be an introduction into the importance of language. So grammar is preceded by an understanding of the nature and purpose of language. And we're going to have to go to the ancients to rediscover what grammar is alone, not to mention Aristotelian logic and even Aristotelian rhetoric. So Aristotle's kind of the gold standard on the logic and the rhetoric, and we can look to Augustine for grammar. Up through the Middle Ages, though, you've got Hugh of St. Victor and John of Salisbury that can really clue you in. But before we can understand those guys, we have to relearn how to read with formal literacy as opposed to the material literacy that was imposed upon us. Mm-hmm. So that part of it's a task, but you're better off knowing that you don't know and going back into the tradition and trying to recover the arts than you would be by getting some modern program and putting your kids through something that's going to be external and ultimately servile and not liberating. Because the point of the arts is to liberate the soul to encounter reality as it is and adequate the mind to reality so that you can live most fully. It's really important. And I'm going to catch up with you in a few months or a year and try to find something much better than that answer.
No, it's just one of those things where, of course, everybody is wondering about where we go from here. And people are at least willing to jump into the deep end of the pool and just learn as they go because they see this as vitally important. So I understand that the demand is going to have to wait for the supply to come around. There's going to be someone out there who will know how to reach into the past, like you say, and pick up the most vital pieces of information and create at least a first-generation curriculum that can be that can meet all these needs at home. That's going to be, whoever does that first is going to make a little bit of money. I'll tell you that much.
I'm not looking for money, but that's what I'm doing now. But it is a task, so I'm in the process.
Well, listen, buying an at-home curriculum is always going to be far less than putting a child through even one semester of private school or whatever the hell it is. So I think that the parents are going to be pretty pleased with being able to make strategic purchases like that. Okay, so what's the next thing on the list? Let's see here.
Let me add one more thing to kind of give a little hope and encouragement and an immediate response is that Tim Gordon and Steph Gordon, they did 4 classes on homeschooling, and they show you where rubber hits the road on a bunch of these things I'm mentioning. So for a quick start, go to Tim Gordon's website and look up his courses. It's free, 4 classes on what they do for homeschooling. If you've got nothing else, definitely go there and get started with that. That'll be your quick start, your jump start.
Maybe I can get Tim to call in. I should have got him on the phone with us in the second half. Damn.
Yes, you should. Let's have him do it. Let's get Tim on here.
Okay. Well, okay. So in the meantime, we're going above the trivium to the quadrivium, you said?
Yeah, the quadrivium, they are the quantifiable arts. If the trivium is about language, the quadrivium is about number, and it's arithmetic, number sense. It's geometry in the Euclidean sense. It's astronomy and music. And these liberating arts are beautiful. They can also be fine arts and servile arts, but the quadrivium is the most powerful when it's liberating.
Incredible. Now from there, history, philosophy, and theology. Theology being the top of it.
Yes, that's right.
I love this stuff here. To go right ahead.
Okay, so history is always that second term of the syllogism where you have your major premise and the minor premise takes a major universal truth and puts it in its historical context or gives a particular. So it's really important to understand that history, as the modern world saying it is, just isn't even real at all. First of all, there's 2 kinds of history. There's history A, which is what's gone on in the world from the beginning until the end. It's objective and in its fullness unknowable by us. And then there's a second kind of history where an honest historian does the best they can to recount events as they actually were. And we have in our history some very good historians like Herodotus and Tacitus and a bunch of ancients that do good history. So that's a vital part of not just getting the lay of the land through the ages, but hearing from great storytellers what happened in their eras. In modern history, we're kind of have a lack of real history. You have things like I don't even remember the name of it, the new Black History curriculum.
Oh.
The 1619 project.
Oh yeah, 1619. Yeah, well, yeah.
And that's not history. That wouldn't count.
Right.
That wouldn't count at all. That'd be a nightmare. So once you have history as a vital interest to say, hey, what happened in year one? What happened? What's happened up to this date? That's a really important set of inquiries for your child. In fact, the word history doesn't mean his story. It means inquiries. Even though 1619 thinks it means his story. They just don't know. But after history, we got to realize that gymnastics, poetry, and the liberal arts are the arts and sciences which make your way into the philosophical mindset. And philosophy is known as the science of the mind, whereby how the intellect truly works, you're meant to reflect and see the nature of all of reality and see how it all hangs together. Philosophy is integral, it's unified, and it's absolutely vital to think clearly. And we were made for that, to discover objective truth and the objective moral standard.
Yeah. And now, see, this is what I'm talking about before, about there just being tied to the material. And I don't know anybody in my life who's taking unless they seek it out. Philosophy and certainly theology, I love how theology is above that too, because of course, is that what gives the practicing of philosophy a little bit more of a rudder?
Well, it gives it its complete fullness. So theology is the study of God, or the study of that apprehension we have that there is a creator beyond time and space that made this universe. Now, we can discover with natural reason that God exists. And if God exists and made the universe, then the highest possible thing to which we could attain is knowledge of God. And God has graced us with revelation through the prophets, revelation through the second person of the Trinity. And this theology is the womb of an authentic education and philosophy. That gift to man that comprises the image and likeness of God on our souls is our way of interacting with revealed truth. So philosophy is the handmaiden. Theology is the womb of all reality. For example, salvation history is the womb of real history. The economy of salvation is the womb of our actual economy, which doesn't mean what most people think it means.
Incredible. Now when we come now taking that, and let's just start talking a little bit about Christmas now. When you talk about events like Christmas, like the Nativity, the birth of Jesus Christ, that is something that is obviously hotly contested, and from the birth to the death and of course the resurrection, because I think that there is plenty of people, even atheists, who know that the historical record is there's far more than enough out there to know that a man named Jesus was born, he existed, he was crucified, but when you talk about the ability to make sense of something that is so beyond the scope of just like my daughter being born in 2020. But to be able to bring a historical moment of the child Jesus's birth, and then to make the argument for his divinity, and that's something that has been very nerve-wracking to me, to be able to try to articulate that for a young person. And of course, when you get into college debates between agnostics and atheists and believers, there is there's something there that it almost becomes a little bit more like sport, to watch the debates go down and to see people take history and philosophy and theology and wield it as weapons, and to see who really comes out in the end. Is that something that you have a lot of experience with, to really to drive home what you think is the undeniable truth of the divinity of Christ and the nativity itself?
Yeah, it's very simple, but it's very confused in this age. So you brought it up earlier. You said there's a naturalistic worldview, and that means there's nothing beyond the material, which means that somebody in the modern world who's a naturalist literally cannot have the conversation about something supernatural, because at their roots, they deny it. So what you often see with these arguments, I've seen it 1,000 times, is you see two people talking completely past each other. Where they ought to stop is recognizing, look, we have a mutually exclusive first principle. The naturalist believes it couldn't happen. The supernaturalist knows that it did. And here's the good news in philosophy. Either it happened or it didn't. Both can't be true. So somebody's right and somebody's wrong. But to reject all the evidence and all the obviousness of the incarnation of Jesus Christ and the resurrection really only makes sense if you're deformed by naturalism. So it's really a tough conversation.
Have you ever bridged that gap for a naturalist? You've never been able to bring them to another, to consider it from a different point of view and have a bell ring? Have you?
Not once.
Okay.
Not once.
Listen, it must be tough. Really?
I do it all the time. I am constantly haranguing naturalists, and they haven't bit once. But I've thrown every single trick of the book at them.
See, last time you were on, I do know I asked this because I asked for advice from you on how the average parent can lay an intellectual, philosophical foundation for discussing the existence of God with their child, if they're the one that is taking the responsibility for their education. Because, for me in particular, it's not sufficient. I would feel a little bit, I would be selling my daughter short if I just told her, well, that's just the way it is. God exists. Look all around you. There's evidence of creation. How can this, just to kind of generalize it and not go deeper. Oh, this is what our family believes. And that's a house built on sand. It can be easily washed away by someone out there who asks a critical question that suddenly you have no answer for. It's just something you've heard since you were brought up as a child. Now that comparing that to exercising faith through theology and philosophy, that's something different. I always find that fascinating, and of course, it's a critical need for a lot of people who are going to be homeschooling. So that's I'm sure that a lot of people are wondering about that.
Yeah, you're so right. Now, look, to start with this is what we believe. Look around you, notice this. The thing about that's okay is that it is absolutely common sense that young souls apprehend that the nature of the mind is to read the interior of things and abstract the universal. Kids know this, so it's a good place to start to say, just look around you. Mm-hmm. Take it all in. That's okay. But then as they get older, you want to start developing a way to talk to them about philosophical principles. And so the key here is this. This is something no one seems to understand in the naturalistic world, but there is a first order and a second order. And the first order is the order of reality, what is in terms of ontological and metaphysical realities. There is the real world. And out of that comes the second order things of becoming, things that are temporal and physical and secondary. The naturalists absolutely deny the first order, which is why it's impossible to have a conversation with them. So with your children, go back to the first order and teach them that things have a nature, things have a natural purpose, things have an efficient cause, and things are made of stuff. That's a great place to start. That's called the four causes. To teach them all four is to expand their souls and allow them to take in all of what is before the naturalists get them and tell them there is no nature, there is no final cause, and then they're trapped in a box where they get deformed. And that's what's happened to all of us today. We're deformed by reductionism. So we got to break out of that and recover what is transcendental and metaphysical.
Very well said. Always very well said with Steve and Jonathan. Okay, so I want to take a little bit more of a turn toward even more, obviously talking about the nativity, that is Christmas, but I wanted to turn a little bit more into the culture, the pop culture, some folklore now. Here's another thing that my wife and I talk about a lot, the approach to dealing with the figure of Santa Claus, St. Nicholas. Now, how do you approach talking about St. Nicholas so that the nativity remains the focus of everything that is Christmas, but that we can still have a little culturally symbolic fun with Santa? Because, as you might have seen, he's become just a secular, goofy, I don't know. It's a big mess. And, so talk a little bit about St. Nicholas and your approach to talking about that so that it doesn't dominate the season.
Yeah, I think you said it just right. Culturally and symbolically, we have to remember that today we've been so reduced that we've lost categories of language. So when we speak, you can speak in a univocal way, meaning your words correspond to reality, or you could speak in an equivocal way where your words twist reality. And we have eliminated that down to just, it doesn't matter what you say. What you say is your truth, and what they say is their truth. But there was a third category we've lost for many generations now, and that is language by analogy. And that language by analogy says we're saying something that's not 100% true and it's not false, but there's a beyond this unity of a similarity between things. And that's where you encounter folklore, myth, and legend, which are absolutely vital parts of reality. C.S. Lewis was known to say that Jesus Christ is the one true myth because he understood what myth meant. Modern people have no choice but to say a myth means a lie. And that's not what a myth is. Mythos is the crossroads where the transcendental meets the temporal. That's really what it means. And so to bring that back and to begin to understand that these symbolic realities, these archetypal realities that enrich our lives and are so meaningful, mean that not only can we share the folklore and the joy and the fun of Saint Nick and that tradition of bringing gifts, and he brought some other things too we should talk about in a minute, but bringing gifts and then reenacting that cultural drama in our homes is not a lie at all. According to the naturalist, it's a lie. According to a normal human person living in the fullness of folklore and culture, it's a beautiful tradition. And kids shouldn't have any problem transcending into the age of reason and looking back and just knowing what a joy that was to celebrate Christmas with this folk hero, Santa Claus, who accompanies Christ and bears with him the gifts that come with it. That's such a beautiful thing. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you're talking about the actual transition, moving out of childhood into adulthood and taking on those new, pretty much upgrading your view on the world, is because I want to be able to lay the groundwork for that transition out of childhood where you don't lose anything. It changes with you. And there's not, I really do feel like Santa Claus in the way that it is served up to children now is really just a recipe for the first true bout of depression that you ever feel in your life. It really takes it out of you. After a while, it's just like, all right, water under the bridge. But it's really hard to go from that feeling of you're being driven by an you can't even describe the magic that's driving you through the days in November and December as a child, and then all of a sudden the sail is not only just the wind is not only out of the sail's been cut in half. You're like, oh. So I want my daughter to know. I want her to know Saint Nicholas and his deeds and his devotion to Christ. But, like I said, Santa Claus has long been stripped of most folklore and is now just a purely secular, goofy character that it's just, if it's all or nothing, I'd rather go nothing than the way that it's treated in pop culture today. Sure, you'd be right to go nothing rather than the materialism of today, but we should go just the opposite direction. And here's the great news and the hard thing for parents. Get yourself back into fairy tales and folk tales. And know that you don't quite understand how to engage in them, but get into them and realize that if you do this properly for yourself and your child, your child's going to have the opposite of depression when they come into the fullness of their thinking, when they realize they have gone to the land of fairy, symbolically. They have participated in the most horrific and the most beautiful things known to the human experience through folklore, culture, and myth. If you bring those alive by being a great storyteller and you get into them yourselves, you might discover a reignition of that joy when you were a kid about Santa Claus, because it's really very beautiful. And the question of is it true or not true is just a reduction and a false dichotomy. So there's real hope for bringing kids back into the tradition of culture and symbol and myth. I beg you to do that for yourself and your children.
Yeah. So talk a little bit more about the types of gifts that are brought by Santa in the early, because I know that St. Nicholas was a brawler. I know that he actually started fist fights with heretics at the Council of Nicaea, so that was pretty interesting to think of Santa Claus as somebody who's willing to fist fight for Jesus.
That's right.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the folklore that's lost. What are the cool things that we should keep in mind with this?
Yeah. First of all, I do think it's lost that we think of Santa as a jolly old man when being a saint, literally being a saint, means this. You will punch somebody in the face for offending Jesus. And a saint would never do anything if you offended them. So what happened with St. Nick is he was at the Council of Nicaea, and Arius, he was just horrified by how disrespectful Arius was for faithful saints, that he just had it and finally had to pop him in the face, which was great because that's what a man does in the presence of defending truth. Again, we should never defend ourselves. We should always defend truth. And that means defending the innocence of our children. So this wonderful tradition is that Santa Claus, St. Nick, he would travel with elves and fairies, and they'd come with him, and they were anywhere from little saints themselves to little devils. So he would bring the children gifts, but there was a qualification. If kids were naughty, these elves, who were generally dressed up in blackface like old women, if they were naughty, they would probably take sticks and beat the children and leave lumps of coal instead of the gifts that they would have gotten if they had behaved themselves. This is really important. And I know parents don't tell them these stories because they don't want to scare the kids, but you have to tell the kids those stories because it's true.
And this is why the first show that you were on, we were talking about fairy tales and legends. And why fairy tales and storytelling was so important, especially for conveying harsh realities or moral codes. And of course, the farther back you go, the little bit less, less gentle the generations of long ago really were about this. Especially so, the elves. Where did they come from historically in the telling of the story of Santa Claus?
Oh, I think that's a question I can't answer, but I love that. What I've always thought, and I can't prove this, so don't take this as the right answer. I thought they were the symbolic figures from beyond, either heaven or hell, angels fallen or good angels, just accompanying. They're at least that symbolic connection to the afterworld. But that's not what Tolkien says. Tolkien says there is a land of fairy, and it's preternatural. It's sort of that middle earth that's made for us to begin to experience taking in either the eternal glorious afterlife or the hellish eternal afterlife. So it's a preternatural, not a supernatural, and not a purely natural realm. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. So Christmas was a little bit more scary back in the day, huh?
Oh, yeah. Right. So this a little more realistic. We've this thing about not frightening our kids, the fairy tales not only take them to a preternatural place where they can experience the transcendent, it prepares them for tough things in the safety of their home rather than waiting till they're out on their own and unprotected and unsafe and then confronted with very difficult things. Kids need to learn how to deal with reality. Talk about preparing them for depression.
Oh, I know.
Shelter them.
Well, listen. I've heard about the mischievous elves. I've read about all that stuff because every Every generation gets a little bit more one direction or the other. But when I read about European traditions, especially around Krampus, that's something. Now I know they still have they just did the Krampus Fest. I think it was where was it in Salzburg? It was just a little while ago. It was on December 6th. I'll play a little bit as we're talking over here. But Krampus, of course, being the horned anthropomorphic figure in Europe, folklore, who during this season, Advent, scares children who misbehaves. And this is what I got from Wikipedia. Listen, he assists St. Nicholas and the pair visit children on the night of December 5th. With St. Nicholas rewarding the well-behaved children with gifts such as oranges, dried fruit, walnuts, and chocolate, which is another reason why. Anyway, and the badly behaved ones only receive punishment from Krampus with birch rods. Man, that is severe, Stephen. Yeah. That's so dark.
Yeah, it's the image of Satan himself, right? Walking along, and he beats kids with this wrapped up birch rods. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you, this is the reason why when I talk about this with my wife too, I other little things that we plan for going forward is like, how many gifts, so-called gifts, do we limit coming from Santa? And have it be something a little bit more of like a snow globe or something that an elf would reasonably craft, because it's so stupid to think an elf learned how to reproduce the technology that's inside of an Xbox hundreds of years after whittling wooden toy trucks. It means it's ridiculous. So right. These are the little types of things that now for the first time we're contemplating as our daughter is finding surprisingly complex questions to ask us at 3 years old. So I know that we have it in. She's got it in for us for sure. But that's what I wanted to leave off with on this first half. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the folklore. Timothy Gordon said he's going to join us around 8:05. So awesome. What I'm going to do, Stephen, I'm going to mute you real quick. We're going to go on a 1.5 minute intermission. When we come back, we'll have a little bit more fun. And on our way we go, okay?
Got it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. That is Stephen Jonathan. All of his information is in the description of this episode. And on the other side of this intermission, we will be streaming exclusively on pill.net. That link is in the description below, along with, quite frankly, .tv, because it's just as simple as going there as well. It's all powered by pill.net, Foxhole, and still you can cast to your television, watch it with your friends in a fully functional, wonderful chat room. Everybody having a good time. And please, ladies and gentlemen, come and jump over. It's 2 clicks. There's nothing like watching it live. And thank you so much. All of this is going to be uploaded and archived later on tonight. Podcast form, Rumble, Rockfin, BitChute. So I will see you in a little bit with Stephen Jonathan. Timothy Gordon is going to jump in for a couple of minutes, and then we're going into your calls for the rest of the evening. Be right back. All right. Welcome back. On the other side of the intermission now. I hope you all enjoy yourself. We're going to get around to your super chats in just a little while. Don't you worry, but we are still joined here by our friend Stephen Jonathan. Stephen, while we are hanging out, we're still on the subject of homeschooling and all the to think that what we're talking about tonight is actually should be an active part in a child's education, to learn about these things from it shouldn't be irrelevant what happened hundreds of years ago like this. This is so inspiring to me. I would be excited for those couple of hours of instruction at home every day if this was my life, but it wasn't, of course.
Right, mine neither. Yeah, the authentic education is actually really exciting. That's another little bit of a litmus test. But we have a problem today caring about what our kids think rather than us bringing them the right thing.
Yes.
So we have to get through that rough patch in the beginning, and you really begin to enjoy reality and truth the more you're able to access it.
Absolutely. And, we are just about to add Timothy Gordon. Oh, Tim, you there?
Oh, Tim.
What's up, Frank?
Tim,
I'm here.
You're on with me and Steven.
Hey, Tim.
What's up, Steve? What's up, Frank?
Good to see you.
Wow, look at this. The whole gang is together tonight. This is the first time we've all been on the same time, so this is really amazing. You know, Tim, what we've been talking about is homeschooling, and before we get into some Christmassy stuff, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your curriculum. Steven was saying how you have a few episodes that you and Steph did just talking about the curriculum. What is it? Is it quadrivium or trivium based curriculum for home?
Well, it's both. I mean, basically, those are the 7 topics you really have to worry about. But we start doing quadrivium stuff more like the equivalent of high school, 7th or 8th grade. Really, all you worry about, the heart of it is this: all you worry about is grammar in grammar school. And it turns out all the other stuff is bullshit. So we literally, what we do with our kids is like, they're diagramming sentences, and then after that, they diagram sentences, and after they finish that, they diagram sentences some more to get them comfortable enough with cases of nouns. Most Americans don't even know what the hell a case is. Then they can start Latin in either 4th or 5th grade, depending on how they take to it.
Wow. I barely passed Spanish 1 by the skin of my teeth in junior year of high school. They're going to be starting Latin in 4th and 5th grade. Oh, man. So here's one other thing before I bring Stephen back into this and we start really riffing here. I asked Stephen a question about St. Nicholas. Now, you came on once before to talk about the brawler, St. Nicholas, Tim. But how do you approach, since you've got a house full of children yourself, how do you approach talking about St. Nick to the point where the nativity always remains the focus, but you can still have culturally symbolic fun with Santa Claus?
I do it with reference to the Augustinian mental reservation. So a mental reservation is, of course, both Saints Augustine and Aquinas and all the great saints in the church affirm that they're truth strict. They're stringent on the truth. You can never lie. There's no white lie. But there is something called a mental reservation. And what we do with Santa is, I mean, we usually call him Santa more often than not, but I try to inject a lot of, look, St. Nicholas of Myra was a real guy. We know where he's from. He was a great hero at the First Ecumenical Council. We also kind of start church history with our kids somewhat young. So they know there's an ecumenical council at Nicaea. He opposed the first recognized heretic in the church. He even punched him or pulled his beard or slapped him, which you're talking about, Frank. And he was a real guy, and he was really associated with, he's the patron saint of children. He loved children, helped orphans, was associated with bilocation. One of the, some of the saints have had that, like Pio was gifted with bilocation. And this could have something to do with the way that in all of these Santa movies we watch throughout December, who knows? I can't tell you it's not true. This has to have something to do with how he's said to bring your presents to all of the Christians in the home. So you're not lying to them. You're just saying real facts about St. Nick. And you kind of let the fun cultural movies tell the story. And the other part of the mental reservation is we literally do buy our 7 children gifts from us, from me and Steph, but we don't, and we buy them a separate gift on behalf of St. Nick. So, you're allowed to do that. A saint is a living person, and he was the patron saint of children. So we're buying a gift on behalf of them, and kind of with a mental reservation, you let the cultural fun abide until they figure it out in whatever 4th grade anyway. So we're not lying to them ever.
Steve, what do you think about that? Buying on behalf.
Yeah, I think it dovetails perfectly with that pageantry, that cultural symbolism, that it's real and you're participating in an ageless story, which is the advent of Christ through St. Nick. So I think it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it
I want
is.
to go to Tim's house too.
I know. I think we're all going to go to the Tim's house as well. That's it. I think he must have more than enough. I'll just set up a camp in his backyard somewhere among the trees and the swamps and all that. So
swamp life.
You know what? Let me ask you guys this. Actually, Stephen, I'll defer to you. Is there anything that you would like to bring up that we have to amend anything that we've talked about tonight, or something that you would like to bring Timothy up on, or ask him, or to expand the conversation? I just want to see if there's anything, because there's always something that you're leaving out because you think that we have to save time. But I really don't mind stretching out a little bit. And if not, we can go somewhere else I was thinking about.
Yeah, I have one thing. Well, I have 10 million things that I left out. But one thing for sure I want to bring up that Tim brought up is that the study of Latin, that's part of the trivium. The acquiring this language as a deep root. I mean, the Latin's the language of the church. And so we apply the trivium to that. And Goethe famously said, you know nothing about your first language until you learn your second. So when I had that one chart with everything you need, Latin is included, subsumed into the trivium as a study of language. Super important. And diagramming sentences is really the thing I would love everyone to go see that Tim does, because they give examples on his videos of how to do that. So I'll leave out the other 9 million things I wanted to mention.
Well, Tim, what do you have to say about that? Those are pretty. I like that quote right there. You don't know. You realize how little you knew about your first language when you learn your second. I like that a lot.
It's absolutely true. So Americans have a hard time with language because they don't get proper old school diagramming grammar anymore. They don't know what a case is. They couldn't tell you the difference between an objective and a nominative case, like pronoun. And therefore, when they try to learn Latin, if any high schools even do this anymore, I don't think they do. But if they were to try to, they wouldn't know what the hell is the difference between the nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative cases, because they never diagram sentences. So we'll have homeschooling moms write us and they're like, what curriculum do you use? And they're freaked out. This is our first time we're trying to homeschool. And, I don't know what do you do, 8 or 11 subjects a day? There's nothing more reassuring than talking to me and Steph, and we're like, we don't do shit with them besides diagramming sentences when they're literally just teach them to read in first grade. Kindergarten is from the actual communists. Teach them to read in first grade. We're just getting Gaby in school in January because he just turned 6 last week. So he's going to start letters and numbers, for first grade. And then in second grade, you start diagramming them, teach them what a predicate is, teach them the difference between, different types of nominatives, linking verb sentence and action verb sentence. And you just get more and more complex, an hour to 2 hours a day with a little reading peppered in of diagramming sentences. And it makes them smart because it's called grammar school for a reason. This is all they really need. You can pepper in a little math if you like, but that's all we do. And it makes them little geniuses because your brain has your intellect, I should say, has categories. You adequate ratio to your intellectus. That's the point of the brain. And all they really need is to be able to put proper substances into proper categories metaphysically in the world. That's what you're doing when you teach them grammar. And they know how to speak right, and they'll be ready for Latin. And, we skip all of the BS math in grammar school until 4th or 5th grade. And then we jump right into algebra in 6th grade. Okay. So the kids are way, way ahead. You just cut out all the bullshit.
Wow. Yeah. Well, okay. Stephen, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. Can I add the best part? So just listen to Tim, go to those videos and watch Tim and Steph. But here's the best part. This 1995 lie about homeschooling kids are weird. Tim and Steph do so little curriculum and other stuff like that because they spend time together as the family. They go places, they do things, they have conversations. When you meet the Gordon kids, you're going to meet kids that are alive. It's proof of the pudding is right there. But that time they spend together, it's such a gift that you can't get back once you send your kids off. Tim and Steph are going to have no regrets. But the time they spend, this is the thing that lets parents off the hook the most. Go camping, Go hang out together. Talk with them constantly. Converse with them. Get to know these beautiful souls because they're your children. It's so beautiful. So that's the best part. Go watch those videos.
Definitely.
Yeah, and the other part, Frank, is like fun stuff. It's the holidays. So Steph, and I have 6 little girls, 1 little boy. So Steph just works with the little girls, teaches them stitchcraft. They'll make something for the holidays, baking, cooking. They'll try really hard dishes. Each of the little girls takes her own dish and tries something hard. That they started last year. They implemented that last year. It's whatever you're doing that day. You know, you get in the classroom, an hour or 2, which can conform to your schedule, and you're just really diagramming. And then whatever else you do in your day is their education, particularly if you have little girls. They need to learn home ec, which has been taken out of the schools anyway. There's nothing of value in the schools, right, Steve?
Yes. Zero.
That's how actually how Stephen and I opened up this call tonight, Tim. That there's literally nothing there. Okay, so here's the last thing I want to do with both of you as we're here in the second half of the show. I wanted to ask a question, and I don't know. We'll start with you, Stephen, and then of course, Tim, you jump on. I'd love to hear you guys talk a little bit. But recently, I have been watching. I just finished watching The Chosen. The three seasons of The Chosen so far. I think a 4th one is coming out, and as I'm watching this, and I really have been enjoying it. I finally had this question pop up in me as I'm watching the depiction of Jesus. And all throughout this and every other biblical film I've seen, he's an observant Jew, pays attention to Shabbat, knew the scriptures inside and out, celebrated Passover. Now I know that he is the subject matter that is the New Testament that was built on him. But when in your guys' estimation, in your studying and all that, did Christianity, whether we're talking Catholicism, whether we're talking Orthodox, Protestants, when you think about a Christian service or a mass, when did Christianity start becoming identifiably Christian, where it has its own list of rituals, its own services, the way it's conducted, and the performative aspect of it? It's just it didn't seem like there was. From whenever you watch a series like The Chosen, it didn't seem like there was any intention of changing the way that they prayed or anything like that. But our masses, especially me growing up Catholic, our masses don't look anything like going to the synagogue and going to temple. So when did Christianity start really looking like its own religion? Because if it's built upon an older one, or it's derived at least in some respect from that, I just wonder where that mutual exclusivity started to really emerge after Jesus' death.
I thought it started before Jesus' death, at least on Holy Thursday, and probably Tim's going to go back to the Old Testament and show us. But I thought it was in the upper room with the breaking of the bread, the Last Supper. I thought that was the first Holy Mass, but I might be wrong. Tim hopefully correct me. That's my impression, is that the upper room on Holy Thursday, the Last Supper was the time. Tim, take it away.
Yeah, and I mean, look, there wasn't a church until Pentecost, but I would say, the first Mass is the breaking of the bread on Holy Thursday. It's important to take note, though, Frank, that The Chosen, I watched, I don't know how many episodes I watched. It was good because of you, because you're a friend and you recommended it. But it is basically a Protestant approach to the church. So they get that tonally wrong. As early as we have letters from the 4th Pope, before 100 AD, reflecting that around the Mediterranean, there were masses being said that were essentially not much different. I mean, this was the celebration of Christianity, was the celebration of the Mass in the catacombs. That wasn't much different from the beautiful TLM that the three of us love.
And this is less than 100. This is less than 100 years after Jesus' death and resurrection.
Absolutely, that was the celebration of Christianity. So when Nero is there in killing Christians and setting Trastevere, the South neighborhood in Rome, you can still go see it, the little cobblestone streets, on fire and blaming Christians for it and killing you if you were a Christian. It was, if they would go to San Callisto or San Damiano, the catechisms there where Christians were having a mass said, literally in, it wasn't in Latin, but doing essentially the missal according to the TLM, with a few modifications. They were breaking the bread and drinking the wine, and it was not said to be bread and wine. This was the actual sacrament of Christ's body and blood in the second or third decade after he died.
Wow, I didn't know this.
Yeah, you have this in Pope's writings. So this was Christianity. This was 3 centuries before the church canonized a Bible and picked what books would go into it. They picked the Bible according to the liturgy, not the other way around.
Wow. Okay. So, and as far as the first, what was the first official Christmas? So, what was the birth of Christ before we settled upon December 25th or anything like that? What was the first acknowledgement of that as an anniversary? Do you know?
I don't. There's a great article by a guy called Jimmy Akin on, I think it appeared in a magazine in 2020 or 2021 on what was the actual date of Christmas and was it far off of December the 25th. And he produces a lot of, this isn't really my area, but he shows a lot of evidence to support that it was actually probably late December, and this was not just a liturgical calendar rearrangement because of the themes of the year. Something like All Hallows Eve, All Saints and All Souls. This is called the Hallowtide, this Triduum. It actually was originally in spring, which doesn't make much sense given the Deathly Hallows thematically. So it was one of the first Pope Leos who, or maybe it was one of the first Pope Gregory's, that in the 700s changed it to, this should be in autumn. So that's a kind of calendar rearrangement. That's not what Christmas was. Christmas was actually likely in late December and one of the last days of the year, according to this evidence Jimmy Akin produces. I don't know if you know anything about that,
No.
Steve.
Oh, Steve, I don't know. Steve?
I don't. I wish I knew more.
Of course, I know almost nothing, which is why I love bringing you guys. I'm so happy that you joined us, Tim. This has been a nice little drop in. And Steve, I really appreciate the time that you've put aside for us tonight. I hope that before you leave, before we all depart on a break here, Steve, can you let everybody know exactly where they can find you and what you're doing now on YouTube and elsewhere? I have your links in the description, but I'd love for you to just, give some verbal plugs a little bit before we go.
Yeah, my goal is to make City of Truth a place that homeschooling parents and aspiring teachers can go to discover resources to rediscover an authentic education that comes out of the intellectual and moral deposit of the Western tradition. So I would love to work with families to recover the liberal arts, philosophy and theology, and history. So that's my plug.
Well, I hope that you are able to expand that out to New York, your influence out to the New York area on the East Coast, Stephen, because man, oh man, do we need options over here. And I would love, if there was something that you or Timothy were running a program that actually had a chapter around here, that is one thing that I would feel very confident enrolling my daughter and any other, if we ever have siblings, I'd hand them all over to you guys, and that would be wonderful. But you let us know how that progresses. I'm very interested in that, and thank you for the time tonight. Hold on, Tim, anything you want to say before we all say goodbye together?
No, it's just always great coming on with you, Frank, and Steve's a very old friend of mine, and so this is a happy gathering. I'm glad to have been called on at the last minute. I was telling someone the other day, like, one of the very, very, very best people I've met on the internet or met anywhere is Frank. I love Frank, and of course I love Steve too. So it's a happy gathering, and this is the week before Gaudete Sunday, the pink candle, which reminds you that it's not a true penitential season the way Lent is. This is a happy penitential season. That's what Gaudete Sunday is all about. Gaudete is my favorite Christmas carol. Just happy Advent to everyone, and Christmas season after that.
Well, I'm sure we're all going to be in touch, and we got to do some fun stuff, especially on the weekends, late night. We got to do some prophecy talk and take some calls and just hang out. And yes, all the best to you guys. I know that we'll all speak before Christmas, but all the best to your families, and thank you both so much for making time for me tonight.
Same to you, Frank. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Great to see you, Tim. God bless you guys.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Tim. We'll talk to you all soon.
Peace.
Bye-bye. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. I had a good time with that. A nice Christmassy and I learn a lot. I always learn a lot. I always bring on people that are going to not only give you a little something to chew on, but me too.